All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. This has been a banner college football season for the Washington Huskies as they just became the first team since the Pac 12 went to 12 members to run the table within the conference. The Huskies took the field last night at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas for the Pac 12 championship game as huge underdogs against an Oregon team that they had already beaten earlier this year. And it didn't take long before we saw a pissed off Washington team take out its frustrations on the Ducks. Washington set the tone early as they took a 10-0 lead after one quarter, and they would go up 20-3 late in the first half before Oregon would rally. Now, Ducks would rattle off three consecutive touchdowns to take a 24-20 lead late in the third quarter as the momentum had clearly shifted to the guys from Eugene. But just like the Huskies did in the first quarter, they go on to dominate the bulk of the fourth quarter. And then when it was all said and done, Washington had gotten the best of the Ducks by three for the second time this year. How did Washington do it, you ask? They set the tone early and often with their ground game. Dylan Johnson had 152 yards on 28 carries and two touchdowns, but they were 152 physical yards. This Washington team, they stayed with the ground attack. This Washington offensive line really dictated things throughout against Oregon's front. And then Dylan Johnson, he's not afraid to mix it up. He's a physical runner. He also has some speed as well. And, it was kind of like a heavyweight fight. It was kind of like, those body blows. They keep setting something up. They keep setting something up. And that's what Washington did. They leaned on that running game. It opened things up for Michael Penix Jr. in this Washington passing game. And because of that, we saw Washington go 10 of 15 on third down last night. They held the football for more than 37 minutes. And as good as this Oregon offense is, they can't hurt you if they're on the sidelines watching the game. And that's basically what they did for the bulk of this contest. You're talking about two quarterbacks that are more than likely going to be drafted in the first round of this spring's NFL draft. I'm talking about Michael Penix Jr., of course, of Washington, and Bo Nix from Oregon. Michael Penix outplayed Bo Nix in this contest. Bo Nix had flurries, and more importantly, his biggest flurry obviously came in the third quarter. But nonetheless, Michael Penix Jr. was consistent throughout. This Washington offense was consistent throughout. They had two wide receivers go over 100 yards last night. Jalen McMillan, 9 catches for a buck 31, and then Rome Odunze, he had 8 catches for a buck 02. And we can't forget about Jalen Polk, who also had 5 catches for 52 yards, as Washington showed their balance throughout. Now, my biggest thing with this, I did pick Oregon to win this contest. I gave them the edge in the rematch, being that the regular season meeting in Seattle was so close, and Oregon did have their opportunities to win that game. Nonetheless, I could understand if somebody wanted to make Oregon the slight favorite. Having them as a 10-point favorite over an undefeated Washington team was flat out disrespect. And this Washington team played with a chip on their shoulders last night. They played like an underdog. I guarantee you, their head coach, Kalen DeBoer, was beating that into their heads throughout the week as they were getting prepared for this contest, and it showed. You look at this Washington team, very viable, darn good football team. And now they're going to turn their sights to the college football playoff. And for me, the question is, how dangerous can this Washington team be? I think they could be very dangerous. There was a possibility that they could have moved up to the number one seed. Still could be a possibility. We don't know how this is going to play out. I mean, Michigan's more than likely in. They're taking care of their business right now against Iowa. I've talked about, Alabama and Texas getting in my opinion. Florida State's struggling with Louisville right now, which is to be expected. But nonetheless, Washington is in a very good spot. They're going to the Rose Bowl. regardless. So, the folks from Seattle are going to make that trek down to Pasadena. I know that there were people who are hopeful for the traditional Big Ten Pac-12 matchup between Washington and Michigan. That's not going to happen because clearly one of these teams is going to be the one seed, being that Georgia fell. However, I think when it's all said and done, Washington is going to be in Pasadena. They've survived the Pac 12. This is the deepest that the Pac 12 has been in a very long time. They started off their season by beating a conference champion. Boise State just won the Mountain West today. I know that they were 8-5, but nonetheless, they won that league. So you cannot overlook that. And Washington destroyed them by 37 points in Seattle, beating some good teams along the way. They beat talking about Washington. They beat a good Arizona team. We didn't know how good Arizona was at the time, but they beat a good Arizona team by 7 points in Tucson, beating Oregon by 3 at home. And this is what Washington did all season long. It wasn't about the style points, but they went out there and got the wins and they took care of their business. Beating USC on the road by 10. And I know that USC had their struggles defensively this year, but nonetheless, getting that road win in the Coliseum, you can never underestimate that. I know that Utah had injuries, but they still were able to survive the two-time defending Pac-12 champions, surviving that trip to Corvallis a couple of weeks ago, surviving the Apple Cup last week, and then, of course, beating Oregon for the second time this season. You can make a compelling argument and say, hey, Washington is the most balanced team that is going to be in the college football playoff. You have solid quarterback play from Michael Penix Jr. You can run the football effectively with Dylan Johnson. You have prolific wide receivers, plural. Okay. You have a good offensive line and you have a defense. So, Washington, I'm not saying that they're going to be national champs, but nonetheless, they are going to be a tough out. And I guarantee you, it's going to be plenty of purple in the stands at the Rose Bowl for the semifinal. So, for Kalen DeBoer, you can't say enough about the job that he's done. He took over a team that just won 4 games in 2021. Quick turnaround last year. They went 11-2 with an Alamo Bowl victory. And then, of course, this time around 13-0. Credit to him, as it's all about adjusting and adapting with the new system. It's all about the transfer portal. You look at what Washington got in Michael Penix Jr. at quarterback and how that changed the fortunes. And I think going forward, this is what teams are going to have to do. It's like free agency in professional sports. We need to stop trying to convince ourselves that these are amateurs. The NIL is here to stay. These young folks deserve to get the money. They deserve to have an opportunity to move on from one job to another, just like their coaches do. So Washington used it to their advantage, of course, and now they are 2 wins away from claiming their first national championship in more than 30 years. But nonetheless, a darn good Washington team to survive the Pac-12 because we've seen it. I know it's been a while since the Pac-12 got to the playoff, but nonetheless, the reason why they haven't is because they beat up on each other. We saw it last year when Utah got the best of USC in the Pac-12 championship game, and people thought it was going to happen again this year. Granted, this year it was a playing game. Whoever won that game between Washington and Oregon, they were in. And of course, clearly it's Washington. But like I said, the Huskies are going to be a tough out come college football playoff time. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take the time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.